Greetings, Buzzketeers, and welcome. I'm Eric Hansen from OTT.X, and on behalf of the whole team, whether you're watching live, on demand, or tuning in via the fabulous OTT.X podcast, we're glad you're here. This is episode 5 of OTT.X's series, The Buzz, where we invite leaders, experts, prognosticators, pontificators, and ruckus raisers of the streaming world to get together and share their thoughts about what's going on today, right now in streaming. Before we get started, I want to make sure to mention that you can find and subscribe to all the episodes of The Buzz via podcast on Spotify. Just search for OTT.X and be sure to follow us so you receive all future episodes as well. And as if that weren't easy enough, I'm going to paste the link to this very podcast into the chat window right now, so y'all can jump out there. Couldn't be easier than that. So with that, I'm thrilled to welcome this episode's moderator and a great partner to OTT.X for many years, David Bloom, senior contributor at Forbes and an industry rabble-rouser in his own right. David, welcome.
Thanks. I'd like to think of myself as more of a ruckus raiser than a rabble-rouser, but I need a rabble to rouse before I can be one of those. But I can raise a ruckus all by myself, which is great, to have a solo ruckus. Great panel. We've lost, unfortunately, a couple of our potential panelists because of some family health issues and other challenges. I hope all works out well for them. They are missed. But we have 3 more folks, Sal Scamardo, Laura Martin, and Tony Huidor. So, Tony, why don't you introduce yourself real quickly?
Do I go on camera?
Yes.
Y'all can jump on camera now.
Well, everybody come up on camera so we can see your lovely faces.
Try to be nice, but we'll do your best. We'll see you all in a little bit.
Well, David, thank you. I'm Tony Huidor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Technology Officer for Cineverse.
Laura?
Laura Martin I'm an equity analyst at Needham and Company on Wall Street.
And finally, Sal.
Hello, yes, Sal Scamardo with FilmRise, Vice President of Marketing and Distribution.
All right. We got lots to talk about and things like, so what? We got strikes and stuff like that and global fear and loathing and horrible wars and stuff.
Right.
Stuff keeps happening in Hollywood. But I think it's important to sort of do some stage setting. I'm interested in what you all think the war that has broken out in Israel and next door, what the implications are, the bigger sort of implications are for Hollywood. We had Qatar and Saudi Arabia investing heavily in entertainment, doing a bunch of deals of various sorts with notables over here trying to buy into the entertainment business, I guess, because they really wanted to lose some money because they're making too much from oil. But that being said, they're buying in. And does that initiative slow down? Are people in Hollywood likely to pull back? Does it have any implications? Are there other implications from what's going on over there right now? I'm just interested in what people think. Laura?
Sure, I'll start. So first of all, half of the ad tech companies that are public are based sitting in Israel. So suddenly a lot of the DSPs and SSPs that we cover, ad demand, we'll see if it gets fractured, but certainly distraction is almost everybody who sits in Israel has lost a loved one or is currently kidnapped. So, and everybody here that's in any way, even if they're based here, but they have Israeli ties. A lot of these technology companies are sitting in Israel or ties to Israel because they have engineering. And so they're worried about their employees. They're worried about their employees' families. Is anyone kidnapped? Is anyone dead? So the whole, emailing back and forth to my CEOs actually sitting there, it's like horrible, horrible calamity. Sort of the words understate the emotional impact on big swaths of anyone who cares about Israel and the Jewish people. So I do think it's going to have at least a distracting point of view, certainly on technology. On the content side, I think just it increases worry. And I do worry that a war of any kind is bad for consumer confidence. So now we have a war over here in Ukraine with Russia. We have a war in the Middle East. You know, maybe the middle of this country thinks, oh, we're immune. It's not a war on our shores. But at some point, like just the conflict arising makes consumers more conservative, and consumer demand is 2/3 of the US economy. So anything that has puts a potential dent in consumer demand through worry or concern, I would say is not good for advertising, and it's not good for consumer demand or advertising, especially going into the December buying quarter.
Okay. Sal, FilmRise licenses content from a lot of places.
Yes.
Are you guys seeing any impacts on deal making?
I mean, I think too soon to really tell. I mean, obviously, it's very sad and concerning, and you know, we're all touched by this. We all have connections, whether investors or people who with content and so forth. So, and I agree, it certainly raises the anxiety level across the board, the general population, what the impact is going to be. I don't think anyone can really say for sure at this point, as the story is still really unfolding and quite tragic and difficult to watch and see the impact on the American consumer, on our audience. Well, we're a global company, so it's going to vary from place to place. But you know, as far as we're on the cusp of heading out to a big market, MIPCOM, so not sure. We'll probably get a better temperature as we have our salespeople here today on their way, leaving tomorrow for Cannes. So I guess we'll get a good read on the mood pretty quick in the coming days as we take meetings with folks. And
that'll be something to watch, right? Because MIPCOM, global market, you know, you've got now 2 wars right on the edge of the Mediterranean, not that far from, you know, Cannes.
And our own internal stress in this country, it really just feels to me that the anxiety level has just been ratcheted up exponentially in the last 24, 48 hours on top of everything else with the war in Ukraine and just our own country in disarray in Washington. I think everyone's really, really feeling it now. So I don't know. I certainly hope it doesn't escalate further. Yeah, but we're going to find out pretty fast, I think, in the coming days as we talk to people face to face.
Absolutely. Tony, I apologize for butchering your last name, but my eyes are old, sir, and an I with a dot looks a lot like an L when it's small type, so I apologize.
No worries, no worries. You made a good effort. Yeah, I mean,
we'll just call you guy. How's that?
I'll reiterate what Laura and Sal said. I think it's a little early, but the ad market is very sensitive, and I think any added fear into the market is not good for advertising. It's been a fairly soft year. Things are starting to improve as we go into Q4. So we're starting to see some improvements, but global warfare, additional conflict in the Middle East isn't necessarily good for business. So we'll be watching it more closely to see what kind of impact. But it is unfolding, so it's a little early to say. But fingers crossed that it doesn't affect us the way that the Ukraine war did.
Right. But 2 of them isn't better. That's for sure. One thing that is slightly better is the labor climate in Hollywood. Now that we have a Writers Guild deal, not just tentatively approved, but overwhelmingly voted for by I think 99% voted yes on the deal after 5 months out in the cold or the hot, depending on how much the trees were trimmed back where they were picketing. But let's first look at any sort of follow, now that we know kind of the general shape of the deal and the AI components and other things. Any thoughts on what that deal means for business getting done in town? You want to start, Tony? I mean, it's a little bit different for you guys because you all don't do a lot of originals, but you have done some, if I recall.
We do some, and we have a few films in production now. They're non-signatory to SAG, so in a few cases it's an independent film where we did have SAG talent, but they got waivers. So it didn't impact us as an indie. There was almost a benefit for us having this strike because it allowed us to continue to produce films outside of the guild system. But I think ultimately it does affect us like everyone else, where the amount of content dries up and it's difficult for us to acquire original or new content, which is a challenge. So it makes whatever is available more attractive to other bidders. So it does raise the price of content for us. But ultimately, it's a good thing that the strike appears to be on its way to be resolved.
Realistically, for you guys, if we get, I mean, what seem to be the opportunities and chances for the SAG-AFTRA deal that gets, settled in the next few weeks. More realistically, though, whether it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months, it's going to be a while before we start seeing new scripted stuff, right?
It is, but as I said, we've been in discussions to either produce and or acquire additional titles that had already started production or were well down the road of production when the strikes broke out. So it does allow us to get fresh content during a time where it's going to be largely dry.
Okay, Sal, what are you guys seeing?
For us, we've leaned pretty heavy into unscripted, so it hasn't really had a direct impact on us. Now, obviously, we do license a lot of content from many places, and I also think there's been an impact just on the buying because we also license out to the content that we do have. So it has put a strain on budgets, and deals have been postponed and delayed to some extent. So there's not as much as robust a market since the strike, just from that. But as far as we're concerned, we're into co-productions that are in the unscripted category. It has affected us promotionally on some of the films and on some of the series that do feature stars, feature film stars and series stars, and in that regard we haven't been able to utilize their talents, even on shows like Unsolved Mysteries, where we do have actors that are featured, and many years ago, as far back as 35 years ago, won't promote it because of the SAG situation. So we have had some impact on PR and marketing.
Yeah, can you quantify even because I think about, I know the next Marvel movie gets put off because they can't roll out the stars to do the talk shows, which weren't operating, and they do the red carpets, and it's a little bit less, but it's funny that even a 35-year-old Unsolved Mysteries episode doesn't promote it.
Yeah,
because I know Tom Hanks is not going to cross the picket line.
Yeah, that's right. We get creative. You have to get creative in those situations, and so we did dig up some shirtless photos of Matthew McConaughey from his first television appearance.
Oh, that's cheating.
They worked.
Come on. I guess in a desperate time, people do desperate things.
He didn't seem to mind. And,
yes, yeah, that's great. I was really amused when racing that Gran Turismo show came out in August, right?
Yes.
Strikes, right? And so they kept talking about everybody on the cast and how great the cast was. What they did is they had screenings, and then they had people talk about how much they loved David, what's his name? The guy from Stranger Things. So, I love that guy. I love that guy. And of course he can't talk about how much he loves the movie or being in the movie. But that's how they worked around it, which I thought was very entertaining.
Yeah, you have to kind of dance around it. And even social media, there were restrictions on it. And we even saw digital creators, that promote films on their programs on YouTube shy away from doing anything. And we were into that space as well.
So you couldn't even do the social media component, which has been a whole world, not enough of another world. That's
interesting. Get in trouble for that. Yeah. So a lot of very polite managers and agents. Thank you for the invitation, but maybe later. So we're seeing them at the table that will hopefully resolve soon. We hope. So
yeah. So Laura, one of the things I really want to get into with you, because you've written some very interesting stuff back in August after you went to an AI conference, and we talked about this at the OTT.X in-person conference at the very end of August. But I think it's worth revisiting now that we actually have a deal on the writer's side on AI you have some big picture thoughts about AI and lock-in and, choose which dance partner you want, because it's going to be hard to leave the party without them. But also what this Writers Guild deal means for Hollywood, what it means for the writers. Any thoughts you could share?
Yeah, so I would say, so machine learning AI, which is what we've had for the last decade, has about 10,000 inputs in those models. And then these large language models like OpenAI, which is a ChatGPT, is an app built on OpenAI large language. They have 1 trillion inputs. So they cost round numbers $10 billion to put up and then to have servers that can run them. Google has some, Amazon has some, these large language models, and OpenAI sits on the Microsoft cloud. So those are the 3 players. What we're seeing is large companies ignoring generative AI. Netflix, Disney, Paramount, 100% across the board. Any large company that's sort of public, ignoring generative AI. We're in the content business, we're storytellers, whatever. Absolutely the opposite is true of the 56 million YouTube influencers. YouTube influencers, everyone we've talked to, including at the OTT.X, everyone is experimenting with usually ChatGPT, which is an app, built on the large language model trillion inputs of OpenAI. So they're using ChatGPT, one, to fire their ad agency. They're like, Laura, I can have generative AI write me a script. I edit it. I can use generative AI to go and find me video clips that are in the public domain. I edit it. I can feed them into, there's 5 companies now.
The ChatGPT will edit, or one of the programs, there's editing programs. I mean, Adobe's Firefly will edit the content, right? I mean, it'll stack up a basic.
But I'm trying to use generative AI. So it has to use, generative AI is only 6 months old, 8 months old.
Right.
So what I'm saying is use the guys who are individuals, or there's 3 guys in their field, they're using generative AI because they say, look, I can get content out faster. I can have more new content. I can close the gap with the big guys. So where you're going to see the adoption of generative AI being used on the user side in media is guys that have 1, 3, 5, 10 employees, and they're going to use it to try to increase new content delivered to their fan base, because that brings them more ad revenue because they can say new content. And the guys who don't use it on YouTube or on TikTok go out of business, because the guys who use technology to accelerate their revenue stream do better. Okay, what happens next? So what happens next is my world, the venture capitalists, they're going to only fund, I think, for the next 5 years, you drop out of Harvard, you better be in a generative AI app like ChatGPT, something driven by, like there's 5 companies that allow you, if you feed in a script, they have 50 voices created by a computer that reads it, and that's your voiceover, that's your narrator. You never need to hire another human narrator. Guys using this, companies using this, 30% cost savings. They think they can get rid of 30% of the labor. And the individuals we're talking to are saying you're cutting 7 hours of work into 12 minutes. So really a lot of, not professional level, but fast to market. The point is, as these venture capitalists create apps built on the Google, Amazon, or ChatGPT, which is Microsoft large language models, once you train your app on that, you can't move. If you've trained your app on ChatGPT and OpenAI, you can't then move to the Amazon large language model. So it creates this huge stickiness factor with whichever cloud large language models you're using. I don't know that that actually affects Hollywood. It affects the relative valuation of companies that can house large language models. But that's a stock idea in my world.
Yeah, that's a stock idea. But there are some interesting things here, because one of the things you're talking about is changing the velocity creation. And when you change the velocity of creation, and you're putting out much more content and much more targeted content, because that's what you can do with this stuff. I mean, I see it with Adobe's Firefly. It's like, oh, we're going to have the mountain scene here, and we're going to have the beachside scene here, and we'll change what the guy's wearing and what the weather looks like and the backdrop and the language in the thing with the top of a button, and change the colors, and here's the product in each place being shown off. Very impressive stuff. But all of a sudden, you're pumping this stuff out with a couple of buttons instead of a couple of days. Well, the guys you're talking about, the guys with 1 million followers on YouTube or TikTok, they need to keep feeding the algorithm. The flip side, though, is at some point when you raise the velocity of creation, you also impact the value of ads. When you have more content, it drives down the value of each individual ad unit. So what does that mean for the industry?
You know, my point of view would be it takes share from other. This is capitalism in its most ruthless.
Right.
The people who accelerate, let's say they can put out now one piece a day instead of twice a week, which I do think is the relative velocity. They're going to take ad share from the viewing eyes. The attention moves from somebody in that community to this guy. So he just gets more ad revenue. He puts somebody out of business, not at Netflix, not at professional content, but within the user-generated ecosystem.
Right.
So
They can't keep up, so they're like, I give up, right? That kind of stuff. Right?
No, I just think new content attracts new eyeballs, and that takes it away from the guy who's showing a third day of his old stuff. So I think it just moves money within the user-generated content, and we get a tech-savvy user-generated content base. And I don't know if you saw the headline today. It is now, a study came out that said YouTube viewing hours had just exceeded Netflix. So because TikTok's growing so much, right? So, you know, all of that bodes poorly for, you know, the future of premium television. They're fighting between streamers and linear. Wrong fight. The fight should be user-generated content, which has zero content cost to the entity at the top, versus professional content, which is really expensive and losing more money, given that they have to now pay more for writers and soon actors.
Right. Yeah, they'll be making less for more costs. They were already trying to do fewer, bigger, better to try to maximize their swings at that, as opposed to just getting stuff up there. Even Netflix, probably the avatar of fast, cheap, get it up there, just overwhelming with volume, has pulled back to some extent. So do we think, I should add, I don't want to lose this. Pluto just announced their algorithm is not an algorithm, or not as much of an algorithm. They're touting the human-centered curation of their offerings as an alternative to the algorithm. And that feels like marketing speak, but is that a thing? That is the algorithm a bad guy or a good guy? Any thoughts, guys? Do you guys care about algorithms a great deal in your daily business?
Yeah, I know Pluto has been doing that for years, and I know they're kind of pitching that as a positive, but I think they just lack technology, so they've been doing it manually.
Well, that's what I thought. It's like, oh, we don't have this. Let's make it a virtue instead, right?
So I think they're touting it as an advantage, but I don't necessarily disagree with them. But it doesn't scale. You can't have the number of channels that they have and continue to do it manually. And we've seen in the past, internally, when we use internal resources as opposed to machines, there's more error when you're using humans. And so it's fallible. And I think that's a problem with Pluto's approach, which it may be working for them now, but I don't know how they scale and take it globally when they're relying very heavily on human capital. Going back to Laura's point, I think a lot of her focus is on generative AI for the content creator community. We're leveraging that for just becoming better distributors, taking old films that don't have key art and creating key art. You know, old public domain films that don't have posters, we'll create posters. Resizing images from portrait to landscape, we use generative AI to fill in the blanks. For us, a lot of my focus has been on, Laura's talking about the LLMs, building an LLM or building on top of an LLM for search and discovery. Better metadata, better search. So a lot of our focus is, as you get more content, you need to be able to search outside standard metadata. So enriched metadata, computer vision based metadata. A lot of our focus has been on that. But it is true. You do pick one and you're kind of locked in. So we are developing our sort of AI initiative where trying to architect it in a way where we're not locked in and we can make it portable if needed, just to ensure that we're not locked in forever with one partner. But there is a lot of money to be spent by the Amazons and Googles of the world, because this is potentially this could knock Google off of its supremacy in search. If they don't invest in this space, the entire success of the company has been predicated on search. If
or the revenue from search, basically.
If ChatGPT continues to accelerate and grow at the way it has, I think Google's in trouble.
Well, it's not going away. We know that. The question is, does it remain relevant in quite the dominant way that it's been? And I think that's a really fascinating question that we won't solve today. Sal, you're the marketing whiz in the group, and I'm just curious what you think about, hey, we don't have AI. That's a good thing as a marketing.
I'm finding this conversation really depressing, actually. I mean, just to kind of throw us humans just out the door so fast on the creativity. I guess the consumer will ultimately decide if it's any good. We'll see. Is it just a volume play? I mean, all the statistics and the search, I agree, it's a great tool as far as generating content, and just and volume equals bigger audiences. How long does that last before it just gets watered down? So I don't know. We'll see. I guess the proof will be in the creativity that comes from everything. So I don't. I mean, I like a little human curation.
I mean, I think ultimately, I think there's this fallacy that computers are going to take over and humans are going to lose their job. No one bemoans the loss of travel agents or telephone operators. That was on the interest of advancement of technology, and I think sadly there will be roles, and at our company it's a lot of back office roles that will be eliminated and replaced by machines. But anything that is creative, I think, inherently requires a human mind, and machines are nowhere near being able to replace that. So the idea that scripts and movies could be directed and produced by machines, we're a long way from that. But I think, like anything else, it's a tool, and if you implement it and utilize it properly, it's to your advantage. To Laura's point, you can produce content faster, better, cheaper. We converted, or we localized Bob Ross 300 hours into Spanish a few years ago using AI, synthetic speech. We were early. We're learning from that.
So was the AI able to capture that sort of blissed out, and then we just put a little happy tree?
No, unfortunately not. And
that sort of whispery, I've been having way too much marijuana as I'm painting Ross' voice in Spanish.
I wish it was advanced at that level when we did it, but no, it wasn't. And I think that's one of the criticisms, that you miss kind of that ASMR that you'd get from Bob Ross in English. And I think as a synthetic speech gets more nuanced, I think there's a better capability of doing that. But Bob Ross was an interesting case study for us, and I think it shows you could. Laura used the word professional. I would say we're near professional level. We were able to bring it to market and launch it internationally in Latin America. So for me, that fits the definition of professional.
I think the ASMR filter is going to be huge. Just throwing that out there as a development opportunity. But I didn't want to lose track while I'm thinking about it, Tony. You did mention that you all are trying, as Laura points out, lock-in is hard to avoid with these big LLMs. How do you structure something so it can dance with any of them if you've trained it on one?
Well, so there's a sense
cross training. Is this what we're going to have, like algorithm cross training?
CrossFit.
You got to wear, CrossFit. You got to wear certain kinds of shoes to be able to do it.
So Google, for example, they're trying to enter the space, or they're clearly in the space, and what they've realized is for certain industries, you're going to have proprietary data, and you don't want to use that data and have it absorbed into the LLM, and then it just disappears, and it's part of the big giant
part of the Borg
model,
right?
So they've created the concept of what they're calling an adaptive layer, which is essentially a model that sits on top of their model. And that adaptive layer is your proprietary IP and information. And so you use that to sit on top of the LLM, and you tune that model with your data. So they did a deal that they announced with Mayo Clinic. It's essentially that same concept. Mayo Clinic takes all their data. They create an adaptive layer that sits on top of their Palm LLM. And then at any point, they can turn off, different data sources that they need to from that adaptive layer, because it's in a separate layer that's not absorbed into the larger LLM. So it allows industries such as us in entertainment, where we can create an adaptive layer of entertainment-based metadata where we control it. And in my case, I'm having to either create metadata or license metadata. And I can't, if I'm licensing, say, Gracenote, for example, Gracenote is not going to want me to have their metadata absorbed into the LLM.
Right.
So I need to have a separation where I could turn it on and off when my deal expires. So that is one of the ways that Google is approaching it, for fear of companies or industries being resistant to adopting the LLM, for the fear that their IP is going to get absorbed into their large LLM.
Well, I think that's a huge issue. So it's smart of them to do that, to be able to provide that layer. And again, on top of that, we'll have the ASMR layer, the truly adaptive layer. Well, let's.
Hey,
yes.
David, can I just respond? I want to make clear to Sal one thing.
Yeah.
I actually think there's a bifurcation in entertainment, that what machines do really poorly. First of all, they can't do comedy at all, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, but that actually speaks to a bigger thing. They actually can't make effective emotional connections with people, humans, let's call it. So that's what happens here. I think there's this delineation between things are going to get really efficient in the back office. If you can computerize it, generative AI is going to cut costs by 30%. And that's going to be really efficient, and you should let computers do that and write the first draft. But people who connect with people, and I think with the rise of the virtual time, we're getting a really disaffected, lonely, isolationist, huge over demand for psychologists and psychiatrists. There's really an onset of loneliness writ large in this country, maybe not internationally. And I think that's the problem that content needs to solve, or will have the most value solving. So if you're Disney and you can put people on a ship and they all love Cinderella, you can charge them $3,000 a night to do that, because they feel like they're part of a community of love. And so this notion of driving community and fandom, I think, is the highest and best use, and will get the most value from media going forward. No computer can do that ever. So content will be faster to market, but marketing becomes important. Who are you targeting, and how do you resonate? That's all got to be human beings talking to human beings at an emotional level, which you just can't train machines to do, because people programming machines are software engineers, right?
So, Laura, I just want to be clear. So you're saying Sal has a job?
I'm saying, that it's got to be emotionally, it can't be BBC content. It's got to be emotionally resident content, which has to be maybe a deeper idea around community than maybe in the past, where you just wrote a great story and you walked away.
You mentioned Disney, and that's a good segue into another interesting topic to me. Not only are those $3,000 a night Cinderella cruises a hit, they come with a custom-made glass slipper for each customer. I'm making that up, but just a matter of time, right? Do they? But that being said, Disney announced last week that they were going to spend $60 billion over the next few years, double what they've been spending, to fill out their resorts and parks. And at the same time, they're raising, the Wall Street Journal reported this morning, they are raising rates on a bunch of stuff after Bob Chapek did a bunch of fundraising or price hiking 2 years ago that really made, when they reopened the parks, it really kind of ticked off some of their loyal fans. Iger backed off on some things, but it looks like he's pushing forward on others. This is the thing Disney can do that nobody else in Hollywood can do, right? I mean, FilmRise doesn't have its own theme parks, inexplicably, I might add. And neither does Cineverse, and that's despite the fact that Chris McGurk, your chairman and my former boss, used to work at Disney and Universal. So I don't know why there isn't a Cineverse verse, but that's just.
We're working on that. Public company can't disclose that.
Can't disclose. Yeah, can't really talk about this stuff till there's an announcement. But yes, we understand. It's going to be a very small, very intimate park. The Dove Channel will have like Dove Land and stuff like that, or the Dove Coop. We'll call it the Dove Coop. But everybody else is raising prices on the thing they can control, which is their streaming services. Netflix is reportedly going to raise theirs within a reasonable break after whenever the actors settle. But we've got Discovery Plus going up 22% or some very large number for Discovery Plus. I'm actually kind of shocked Discovery Plus is still there because they put virtually all the Discovery Plus content into Max, right? And you got to be a hardcore reality show person to spend $8-10 a month just to only watch those shows. But everybody else besides Disney, their push is, we're going to charge you more and give you less plus ads. How great is that? Because we're cutting all this programming. We're not making as much. We're not going to have as much. Is this going to work out? Or are you going to just have everybody come watch FilmRise and Cineverse channels, ad supported?
Great for us, we're free, so that's our model. So we've certainly picked up a lot of the cord cutters along the way, and obviously there's going to be a saturation point where it's just as much as cable.
Right. What do we call the people who are not cord cutters but are subscription cutters? I mean, we got to come up with a word for this, right? Laura, you're good at this stuff. You're using AI to develop this stuff. We got to come up with something for the people who are cutting the subscriptions and not the physical cord.
It's called churn.
Well, that's a good question.
Churn.
I'm going to come up with that. Absolutely.
The churn champs. The churn champs.
The churners. Yeah, exactly. That's good.
Churn and burn. But you're picking up not just cord cutters, but also people who are cutting back on. Because Laura, I believe in one of your very recent, you were talking about Netflix, and this coming time you don't think is going to be so great. But Tony, real quickly, what are your thoughts on offering less and charging more for it? Is that usually a winning strategy for companies?
Well, I mean, we've publicly announced the Spotify for Film model, right? So our goal is to essentially aggregate as much content as we can, ideally focused on fandoms or verticals. And so you mentioned Dove, and we have Bloody Disgusting. So we are acquiring.
Yeah, I want to see the Venn diagram of those two channels, by the way, Bloody Disgusting and Dove channel.
Yeah, those are two diametrically opposed brands for sure. And so for us, our goal and our vision is to aggregate brands and that appeal to certain verticals, and then build up those verticals to reach as much of that as we can, and then aggregate everything under Cineverse, where we then make a very full offering across one service, across different verticals, different brands. But of course, the more content you have, we're taking the opposite approach. We're looking for more, not less. It creates issues with search and discovery. Hence, a lot of my focus on AI for enhanced search and discovery. My problems would be a lot less if I had a catalog the size of Disney Plus. We have tens of thousands of titles, and it makes discovery very difficult, especially when it's long tail or older niche content that's focused on specific demos or specific verticals. So we are also seeing that there is a lot of sort of movement towards raising prices. We hadn't raised our prices since the beginning, since 2015, 2016. So we recently announced some price changes on our services as well. We feel the market can sustain a few dollars, but I think to Sal's point, even if ad supported, we don't have the premium content. So I think there's a lot more price sensitivity in terms of any price increases that we do on our subscription services, which have smaller catalogs.
Right. Laura, you part of this or connected to this is you were writing not only about some of the shifts in prices, but some of the implications of the Charter Disney deal and integrating streaming content and services within the more traditional legacy package, and what the implications are for Netflix. And you actually think that the linear TV system in general will make a bit of a comeback, or perhaps a lot of a comeback, in part. At least it's not falling off the table like it was, because this deal will certainly propagate across really the entire industry, right? It's going to be most favored nation clauses kicking in, and Me Too deals, not that Me Too, but I also deals. I'll just go to the Wimpy, the hamburger guy. I also deals going out across the industry and changing where the linear bundle goes, what it looks like. What are the opportunities for our kinds of listeners on this conversation with OTT.X, the FilmRises and Cineverses? What are the opportunities within the traditional bundle now that the lid's been pulled off a little bit? Any thoughts?
So, I think the most controversial thing we're saying is that the linear TV bundle will resume growth, because we think what the data point from Charter Disney is that Charter forced Disney to give them for free current ESPN app and the new ESPN that Disney's
Whatever that's going to be,
gonna
right?
launch.
I mean, whenever
they're gonna-
whenever they make the changeover, you get the other one, right?
And they're paying a wholesale rate for Disney Plus. Okay, well, Disney had the most negotiating leverage because ESPN is holding together the linear TV bundle.
Yeah. Right.
Comcast steps into that deal immediately because it has most favored nation status with whatever Charter negotiated. So Comcast now has that deal as of the renewal. And when the Comcast deal comes up, and any at Fox, Warner Brothers, Paramount, all of whom have less negotiating leverage, what they're going to say is, look, if you want to raise from us, the cable company, you're going to have to contribute your streaming assets back because you're putting all this content outside our bundle. Otherwise, we're not going to pay you more. We're going to pay you less. So they all want to report growth to Wall Street. So they're all going to just agree to put their streaming assets in, which is going to solve the current friction point with streaming with consumers. Used to be linear TV's friction point was, we're paying for 200 channels we don't want. You're overcharging us. Right. Now the friction point is the average home has 4 streaming channels and they cannot find content. No matter what they want to watch, it's on some app that they don't have, that they have to go download, even if it's for 7 days for free. It's really annoying to consumers. What I think, aggregation has value, and bundles always sell at a discount to a la carte, always. So I think what happens now, we get a reaggregation back into the modem provider, because you got to have a high-speed modem to have streaming. And so we get growth again in linear TV because the friction point is discovery, and you'll have all your sports, and then you'll have maybe not Netflix, it will stay a la carte, but all the other guys are going to have their streamers sitting on the same box at the same input, over your Xumo box or whatever with these cable companies. So I think we get growth of linear TV. That is good for free guys because it drives traffic like it's a big shopping mall. All the traffic, there's a bunch of traffic that now isn't available to fast channels or AVOD because it's all sitting in the linear TV ecosystem. Now, you guys might not care because those are old people and your demos, you're selling ads, which is younger demos. But believe me, more traffic into the mall, Nordstrom's and Macy's, anchor tenant, if they pull people into the mall, sort of everybody wins. So I think free is a better proposition. Hopefully you can get some money or at least must carry from Comcast and Charter. But I think having that extra reach of that linear TV ecosystem where there's still 60 million homes, which you don't have access, is going to end up being good for fast channels and free alternatives.
Yeah, I certainly think that has a lot of implications. I also think there's going to be some substitution going on here. So the Disney deal cut out 8 channels, including Freeform and a bunch of others that I wasn't quite sure actually existed, but it was good to know that at some point they made sense to Disney. They're going to save something like $300 million off of not paying for Freeform and all those things. And that's a bunch of jobs that aren't going to be there sooner or later. And I think that sort of cutting off the bottom end channels will play out across the industry. We're going to see, they used to stuff the set-top box, right, with all these other channels, rake off some carriage fees and maybe a little bit of advertising across all their channels. And now they're going to have a smaller set of those traditional channels, plus whatever they're streaming, plus whatever FilmRise is streaming or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be a really interesting shift in the business, but you're right. All of a sudden you've got access to 60 million, 55 million, whatever that is this week. And maybe it's not going to collapse. The bundle still has a lot of other value to consumers. And I think we're seeing an interesting experiment this week with the launch of the sports component. You mentioned the ESPN, the changeover that we now believe is not that far off with the ESPN to ESPN Plus becoming a streaming thing, particularly with the Charter Spectrum deal. But also Max now has a sports thing. They're giving it away for a few months and then they'll start charging. Is that going to be the way with all the regional sports networks that have collapsed and stuff like that? Is this going to be the way we're going to get live sports going forward? Is these sort of add-on packages so that you have to pay $10 extra to get 300 games or whatever? And what do you think? Who wants to take that one on first?
Well, I mean, sports has always been such a huge driver, audiences and the loyalty factor. So it does make a lot of sense to me. I spent a lot of years working with the major leagues and sports, and it was a great way to kind of build audiences and leverage off, programming.
Right. You would promo your NBC sitcom on the baseball game of the week or whatever, right? That kind of thing.
Getting huge, highly engaged audiences, incredibly loyal fan bases, the numbers are so strong. So it really makes a lot of sense to do that and to offer that. The fact that they're even open to doing it and moving into those spaces now, we're seeing more and more of that, with the services and platforms. So it should be interesting to see. And they obviously have those relationships, HBO and with the NFL, and there's a kind of existing relationships they can leverage.
I mean, any live events, especially sports, is hugely popular. I just don't know how they make the economics work. Those rights aren't cheap.
Right. Well, that's sort of the next question. $10 a month for all they've got: NHL and Major League Baseball, NBA, other stuff. It's like, I don't know that that's a number that's going to stick very long, right? Speaking about price increases.
Those are a lot of hungry mouths to feed. And
And that leads us to another question, which is, given they've launched this and given that the NBA rights are up, and the NBA expects something like 75 billion to 100 billion in rights payments, which I think is aggressive, based on this changing universe. I mean, Warner still got $45 billion in debt on a company with a market cap of 25 billion. Can they afford to splash out a couple billion, or do they have to splash out a couple of billion in a next tranche of NBA rights? What do you think, Laura?
No, they cannot. Neither can Paramount. They're too over-levered. Wall Street won't support it.
Interesting. All right. What do you guys think about what that means? I mean, where's the money going to come for an NBA deal like the league would like to see? Is it going to be like Apple buying stuff? I've heard, I just saw a little blip from CNBC that Ted Sarandos over at Netflix is a little bit less disinterested in the NBA now than he was 6 weeks ago or something. I mean, is it going to need to be one of the digital giants that's going to need to chime in on this and bring the serious cash for some sort of, I don't know if it's a 360 deal?
I wouldn't rule it out. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I mean, it keeps people coming back. And if you're looking for some stability in terms of audience numbers, you're not at the whim of every hit show that comes and goes into production, 2 years to get the next season.
Right.
You've got live sports that keeps people coming back, and you can continually kind of mine your catalog too, and introduce new shows. And that was the whole strategy behind NBC and the Olympics. They overpaid for that because it drove so much traffic to everything else, and creating hit shows at that time back in those days. So the model's it's kind of like the same thing, but a new way.
I think
that's a really good point. Real quickly, I just want to interject that deal, that Olympics deal, made sense, but does it still make sense in 2032, which is when that deal runs until?
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating to watch.
I think it's a bundle or it's a premium tier. I think that's the only way they could make it work. They need to separate the revenue to be able to pay those rights.
Okay, so they'll have to be an add-on. I mean, what Max is doing with an add-on that explicitly breaks out some chunk of change, however it scales, is probably the only way to make it work, right? Because you can't afford to fold that in like ESPN was for decades, right?
Yeah.
But probably the new model is what YouTube TV is doing with the Sunday ticket, where you can add it on for sort of a discount to your YouTube TV, like subscription, or you can just buy it independently for $400. Right. Because that maximizes your reach, because some people don't want to disconnect their Charter or their Comcast or their Hulu, skinny bundle. They just add the $400 for the 18 weeks of football. That's probably the new model for whoever does this. And I would be shocked if Netflix will, they may have gotten softer on this, but this kind of money is a big deal. I will tell you, it brings in a totally new advertiser base. Not only does it bring subscribers, but the advertising base is completely non-overlapping with any ad base that Netflix currently has. So if they do bid for this, they're doing it for subscription stickiness, no problem, but also the advertiser base
Sure.
of reaching men, which that's probably something Jeremy Gorman stepped down over. They just have a really narrow demo over there, and they don't have any men, and sports would solve the male skew problem.
Yeah, all of a sudden they start running pickup ads, for instance, right? I mean, that's the sort of thing, and beer ads that weren't running. We should probably be wrapping this up pretty quickly, but I am advised by Mark Fisher, the great leader of OTT.X, that one steady component of this experience, the buzz, is a lightning round, a story that each of you may have noticed that we haven't gotten into in this delightful conversation. Anything that comes to mind that you'd like people to take a peek at, something that you all think is an ongoing issue, or just something that's interesting. Any thoughts? Anybody want to volunteer something? Sal?
Oh gosh, I don't know. We touched on this earlier, but I think it's digital creator space for us, and that's in the streaming space, especially free, and leveraging that. I think it's really interesting, and what a lot of what Laura said makes a lot of sense. But we're finding a lot of success there, so I think that's an interesting thing that we should keep an eye on.
Okay, so you'll be living over there with the creators
for new programming, source of new programming for us.
Interesting. Tony, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say for streaming, we need to move beyond the traditional pre-roll, mid-roll, and move more towards advanced ad units, interactive ad units. And there's been a lot of resistance from the big streaming platforms to adopt Triple Lift or Gum Gum. I think these ads really allow us to offer services with advertising capabilities that are very common on ESPN and other cable networks. We need to bring that to fast. Otherwise, I think the CPMs will remain stagnant.
Okay, that'll be interesting to see new kinds of ad units. I find it fascinating that the platforms are resisting it. So that's something that's surprising to me.
Yeah,
it's already kind of out there in cable. I mean, it's like
what happens is now you start getting ads in content, so you get an overlay during a show, and
right.
So
it wraps around it or whatever, right?
The L bands, the lower thirds, the craws, the bugs, and so now you have the ability to advertise more of the content. And I think they're very concerned about, what is their share and how do you track it, because it falls outside the traditional mid-roll, pre-roll sort of ad stack.
Right, they know how to track those windows that are set aside, but when it's actually inside the stream, it's like, what is that, and how do we get our piece? That makes more sense.
So there's a lot of issues on the business model, but I think also they're very protective of their audience, and they don't want to do anything that they feel may discourage viewers. I don't necessarily agree that maybe some content you want to be protective of, but I think there's a lot of content that really could benefit from more monetization.
Okay, yeah, that's probably going to be the story of the entire industry for the next while. Laura, I'll let you take us out. Anything sitting on your head that we didn't get into today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point I would raise is that the basis of competition between this notion that linear TV competes with streaming, which is sort of all we talk about in 10 hours a day, is actually wrong. That I think it is possible that really the guy about to take down that whole ecosystem, linear streaming, all broadcasters, which we didn't get to today, is the user-generated content business, because there's just millions of people globally who are willing to work for $20,000 a year, thinking that's enough money because they're sitting in a low-income part of the world, who can generate community and connection, whether it's makeup or unpacking or dressing. And maybe we don't understand that because we're sort of not of that generation. But the point is they take money out of the advertising ecosystem, and they're ever replenishable. One gets married and goes off, and another one comes up. Some 15-year-old suddenly resonates, and maybe she has one hit song, or, depends on but the point is they never end. They are relentless. There's another million waiting to take over from the million that have lost, and it's going to use generative AI. So their content creation is going to be sort of more and probably more targeted, because like you say, Les, so I think attention is what advertising is going to that's going to be the common denominator. And just user-generated content is lower cost because those kids don't need as much money. And it's going to be more effective because they're going to use generative AI, and it's going to take time share and eyeball share from all premium content, which lowers the budget at a time when the guilds are getting more money. And so they're going to have to cut down the numbers of productions. So
Right.
all of that feels over a 10-year frame worrisome to me. So I would just keep that in mind as TikTok continues to grow share and YouTube is now larger than Netflix in total viewing. Attention is the metric that is monetized in media. That'd be my
Absolutely.
closing argument.
Absolutely. Your comment about that just keep coming reminds me. I worked at USC's business school, Marshall School of Business, for a little while, and the dean had a joke. He would tell, it's like every year the kids come in, they're the same age, and we're a year older, and that's kind of what's going on, right? It's like the creators. There's a new, ever replenishing fountain of hope and ambition that spurs people to try something, and maybe either they got parents that are well enough off that they can subsidize this, or they don't have great options otherwise. It's why boxing is still around at this point, because you don't have great options. You go to the thing where you can make money. And this one involves fewer blows to the head normally. But absolutely, I think that's a trenchant comment, and Hollywood has no good response to it except trying to co-opt some of the biggest of those names and put them into, I don't know, some talk show or whatever. Anyhow, with that, we will wrap this thing up. Thank you all, everybody. Eric, do you want to say anything?
Sure. Do I want to say anything, David? Really?
Silly question. Eric, why don't you say something to wrap us up?
Just try and stop me. Well, this was mind-blowing, y'all. Thank you so much. Incredible thoughts and ideas. I can't imagine anybody actually believing that Hollywood actors and NBA basketball players may have to take pay cuts because some 12-year-old has a hit song on YouTube. But you know what? It could happen. So
more importantly, it's not one 12-year-old has a hit song. It is millions,
right?
And billions, and they keep coming. It's not one, because that NBA player or that Tom Hanks Oscar winner is sui generis. I mean, it's one of a kind. But those kids keep coming, and they keep getting an audience and attention.
Democratization of content creation, and it's unstoppable. Fantastic. And also, I want to mention that here at OTT.X, not only do we not have the technology to AI a bunch of stuff, we also have a commitment that our guests on the Buzz will be real people for the foreseeable future anyway, because it's important that we feel like we can help to solve the loneliness problem just a little bit and help up-level everybody's spiritual vibration. So thank you, Tony, Sal, Laura, David, for being a part of that. I'm going to start working on my cannabis inflection, actually, so I can protect my job.
There you go. I'm looking forward to the panel we do that also includes Lil Michaela and Janky and Guzman, the all synthetic celebrities. I think that's going to be awesome. So
that'll be a nice parlor trip. Anyway, we have to get moving on. But thanks so much once again, David, Tony, Laura, and Sal, for taking us on that entertaining and always enlightening ride down the rabbit hole, over the top, and for the most part without careening off the rails. Thank you for that. We'll be back again for the next edition of The Buzz on November 8th, when we give TK Arnold, publisher and editorial director of Media Play News, the reins, with some great panelists to thrill and enlighten us as always. You can register to attend this and future episodes from our website at OTT.X.org and find our podcasts on Spotify. Hope you'll join us and invite your friends and colleagues as well to get in on the buzz. OTT.X is proud to offer these sessions for free to the OTT industry on behalf of our OTT.X membership. If you're not yet a member, I want to invite you to head out to the website, OTT.X.org, and look into becoming one. We have membership tiers for a broad range of organizations and professionals. We'll drop the link into the chat in just a second. Until next time, everyone, thanks so much for being here, and stream zestfully. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.